You ready to go? We're joined by Scott Potter of Metro Water Services. Scott, if you would, please introduce anyone you brought with you to help in your presentation today, and then begin your budget presentation to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To my left is John Kennedy, the Deputy Director of Metro Water, and to my right should be Glenn Mizell. He stepped out for a moment. He'll be right back, the Finance Director for Metro Water Services. I've got some brief remarks about current fiscal year and then the budget proposal for this year. Starting with performance financially this year of the department, I'm going to split it up into water, wastewater revenues, and expense, and then talk about stormwater. On the water wastewater side, through April 2012, the revenue for the department is $166.9 million, compared to $159.3 million for the same period last year. That's an increase of $7.6 million, and right now we're $11.7 million for net income year to date, and that's good news because that gives us money for debt service, for capital investment. On the expense side, we're under budget year to date by $6.5 million, and we expect to maintain that through the year and finish the fiscal year under budget. The expenses year to date are $82.2 million through April, and that compares to $80.7 million for the same period last year, which is a 1.9% increase comparatively. And to provide some context to that, we were $82.1 million in April of 2009, and the CPI average for 9 years is a 2.3% increase. That's nationally, and then the NACWA index, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, the 9-year NACWA index is 5.6%. So we're beating both CPI and the NACWA index pretty well. So we're pleased with that. On stormwater, the revenues match almost exactly. If you look at the last 2 years, the revenues through April 2012 are $12.8 million, and that matches to $34,000 for April of 2011. So we have a really good handle on revenue, on stormwater predictability. And on expenses, it's pretty similar, $9.9 million through April of last year and $9.5 million through April of this year. So I feel really good about where we are financially on both the water, wastewater side and on the stormwater side. To provide some context to how the department is operating, we'll look at water and wastewater production first. Water production is flat, and there's two reasons for that. One, we've got an aggressive leak survey program, and we're finding and correcting leaks pretty aggressively, and we've been doing that for several years. And then secondly, conservation has taken hold nationally, not just in Nashville, and that's a good thing. It's not good for revenue, but one thing we don't need to do is try to make the sidewalks or the roadways grow grass by watering them with drinking water. And people are getting much more careful about how they water, for example, and how they use water. I think the flood obviously introduced a lot of awareness of water use to everybody in Nashville. And the habits that people got in 2007 during the drought and in 2010 during the flood, I think have held through the present date. Looking at 2012, like I said, we expect to be under budget when we complete the fiscal year and over budget on revenue. So our net income is going to be good. We're going to be a little bit less, I think, than what we projected on revenue, because I think the conservation effect has taken effect a little bit more than we had predicted. And we might make up some revenue, I think, in June and in May because it's been so dry. One thing we've noticed, the water demand for 2012, especially from January till present, has matched almost identically what happened in 2007 in the last drought. And the Corps said last month pretty clearly that they considered us in a drought, and I think the data indicates that as well. So the good news is we've done some capital work throughout the city to alleviate the issues we had for delivery of water during the last drought, so I don't see that as an issue, but I just think it's something we need to be aware of as we go into the summer. Looking at the budget request, I'm going to talk about some enhancements that we're requesting and why they're important. The budget for fiscal 2012 was $104.6 million, and we're requesting $115.7. And there's a variety of requests in there. First and foremost, utility expense is going to be going up pretty dramatically, and that's a common theme in our business. Electricity is obviously vital to what we do, and it's very demanding for what we do, especially on the wastewater side. It takes a lot of compressed air to treat wastewater, and we have to buy our power from TVA/NES, and they've made us aware of a possible dramatic rate increase this year. We're budgeting an increase of $825,000 utilities, and $625,000 of that is in electricity. Excuse me. Sorry, I coughed on you. On next big item is flood recovery. We're requesting an additional $2.9 million on flood recovery, and most of that is in the Nashville SAFE program that has been pretty well publicized, I think. It has two components: the flood warning system and the development of a series of projects that we can choose from to partner with federal, state, and local agencies to construct to mitigate the effects of the next flood. And maybe you caught that I said the words next flood because we have to plan for the next flood. We experienced in between a 500 and 1,000 year event in 2010. That doesn't mean it's going to take 500 or 1,000 years for the next one to occur. Those of us who grew up around here remember the 75 flood. There's some folks probably still out there remember the 27 flood. So the periodicity of the next flood could be next month, could be next year, could be in 50 years. But my point is that it's our obligation to plan for the next one and to try to mitigate as much damage as we can. On road and pipe repairs, I think Public Works did a really good job of talking about the demand for road repairs. We do have about 400 main breaks a year that occur throughout our system. We have almost 3,000 miles of pipe, and we have main breaks that occur in the right-of-way, and they damage Public Works' streets. And we've got to fix them, and we must fix them to Public Works standards, because if we don't, it damages the street further. So we can't control that expense. We have to react to it, and if we have a hot, dry summer, it's going to get even worse. If we have a cold and wet winter, it'll get worse. So it's almost entirely weather dependent about how much money we spend on road and pipe repairs. We have to budget accordingly. We have a request of $1.6 million for pipe inspection and cleaning. One of the things we learned after the flood was that there exists companies nationally whose business is to clean major trunk sewers, and we hadn't done that historically in Nashville. And we were visited by several firms after the flood, and they introduced what they could do, and they've been awarded contracts to clean our trunk sewers. And our trunk sewer is a large diameter sewer, up to 11 feet in diameter as an example. And to give you all an idea of how much stuff we've taken out of the sewers since the flood, we've removed 6.7 million pounds of debris from the sewer system. And that provides a lot of additional capacity in the sewer system that's going to help us in a lot of ways. Most notably, it's going to give us the capacity back in the sewer system so we don't have overflows. And the last thing is we had about a $900,000 increase to our LOCAP request from our friends at Finance, and we can't really say no. So that's one of those expenses that we're going to have to put into our budget. So we feel really good about the budget. We feel good about our ability to meet it, and we feel that the requests that we made are necessary and provide benefit to the citizens of Nashville. On the stormwater side, we had a financially status quo year. Revenue is tracking exactly like it did last year, and we've got a really good handle on how to manage the expenses that come from the department. And so we feel really good about what we need to do going forward on stormwater. That is always a big interest amongst council members. And I guess I'll pre-answer one question, is we can do as much work as we can provide revenue for. So We have a lot of success in doing A&C projects. We've gotten a lot of good bids, and I've got all kinds of data about what we've done, and I can provide that at y'all's request. So that concludes my remarks, Mr. Chair. I'm sure we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Councilman Hunt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and glad to see you, Mr. Potter, John, and the crew. Thank you for coming. I just got two quick questions. Over the last 3 years, you know, we've had budget cuts. How many, if any, employees that you lose as a result of the budget cuts we've had over the last 3 or 4 years?
We haven't lost any employees as a result, but we're down. I'm turning to my notes here. I'll give a bit of history. The water department at its peak had 1,020 employees. That was 25 years ago. And obviously the department has grown dramatically in that 25 years. And today we've got 646 water and wastewater employees and 81 stormwater employees. So that 1,020 to 646 is where we've gone in that period. And we've maintained a personnel level. As an example, in 2001, we were at 663, and now we're at 646. So the number of employees that we have has consistently been reduced, and that's not a good thing. One of my fundamental risks is right now, if I had people wake up tomorrow morning and decide that they were retiring, 20% of that workforce could walk out the door, and because they're eligible to retire. And obviously, those are the most experienced, most qualified people in the department. And we've got to start replacing them. There's just you can't teach experience, as you well know.
Right.
And we've got to get people trained. We have to get experience in the system. It's such a vast system, and the nuance to operating it is extensive. So for us to continue to reduce our numbers is just not practical, and it's irresponsible from my perspective. We just can't do it.
And I understand that, and I just wanted to make sure that people know how hard we work to keep a good crew and still make it a good, efficient crew. So thank you for all the work you've done.
Yes, sir.
The one final thing I want to do, what is the status on our favorite combined sewer system? How's that coming along, and how did the flood of 2010 affect it? I've always wondered about that, but I never got a chance to ask you that.
The combined system filled up. Another little bit of history, in 1885 or so, Nashville was experiencing cholera and typhoid outbreaks due to contact with raw sewage. The solution that was pretty smart at the time was to take the outhouses that were discharging into the creeks behind the homes in Nashville and to make the creeks sewers. So the engineers and the constructors of the time built an elegant system that's it's very beautiful actually, but discharged to the river. In 1955, the city built the first wastewater treatment plant, the central plant, and started treating that wastewater. Well, for any engineering system, you can't have a system large enough to accept any sort of rain event, so it had to be designed to overflow. So it overflows to the river. Well, in the last 25 to 30 years, we've eliminated a considerable amount of overflows to the river, but you still have a combined system downtown. It's 8,000 acres, and on occasion, it still overflows to the river. During the flood, the river backed up into the system because, as you recall, they were creeks. So the river behaved like a river and backed up into the creeks, which in this case is a combined system. That's where a lot of that debris came from that I talked about earlier that we had to remove with the contractors. That's 6.7 million pounds of debris. So the system worked fine. It works great. On a day like today, it works like a champ. But the whole thing is you got to make sure that you will actually, we're regulatorily required to maintain it properly in accordance with the Clean Water Act, so it overflows only when permitted. Right. So the summary is it works great. Bad news is it's over 100 years old, and I guess a follow-on question that I'll anticipate is what would it cost to replace it?
That was my next question, yeah.
You know, the number I toss out there is $1 billion, and I just like everybody to kind of visualize what that means, and that means pretty much laying waste to the city and digging up enormous lengths of the city. Visualize starting at Vanderbilt's football field, underneath which one of our major combined sewers flows, and take that just outside our back door here to the river. We'd have to dig that entire thing up and replace it with a major sewer, and then also expand the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant and still provide for an overflow. So it just wouldn't be smart. And then finally, when it does rain finally, after it hasn't rained in a couple of weeks, all this stuff on the ground, on the concrete, that's been cooking for the last 2 or 3 weeks, all of that would go directly to the river because all the rain would be designed to go to the river. Now, that first flush, so to speak, goes to the plant to be treated. So there's a lot of arguments for the maintenance of a combined system. You just have to have extremely minimal overflows and then treat the overflows as well as you can before it goes into the river.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted everybody to know how expensive that project is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Tiger, you're recognized.
Thank you. Scott, a couple quick questions. Extension and replacement fund total minus $23.5 million. I'm assuming maybe we finished some projects up, or what is that big negative?
That's a reduction in the net value of the E&R fund. It gets drawn from and then made up over the course of the year. Over the course of the year, I think it's going to maintain a flat.
It'll be flat.
It'll be flat over the course of the year, but in the snapshot in time, its value is that much less over the course of.
Okay, the 9.47 FTEs, Water and Sewer Administration. What? Maybe it's answered more detailed here in the book, but basically that's obviously a lot more than personnel.
Well, it's we put all of our vacancies in one pot, the administrative pot, and we dole them out just for accounting purposes.
But the 9.4 million, what else? Any major
it's not
change?
9.4 million, it's 944,000. No, it's 45.
J16 is what I'm looking at. Changes, budget changes and impact highlights.
Can you give me the line just so I can see it?
This is up at the very first line on page J16 of our budget book. 9,422,400.
I think that's the total of the requested increase because our total increase is about that amount.
And so that's all those things you described in your presentation.
Yes, sir.
We put our entire budget in one business unit.
Okay.
And then we spread it out to intro.
All right.
That represents the entire request, Councilman.
Okay. I just look for big number differences from previous years.
Yes, sir.
Success of folks signing up for your electronic statements and whatnot. We talk about this every year, and tell me whether it's ahead, behind, where you expect it to be.
It's doing real well. We have budget billing available now, and let me get the exact numbers here just so I give you the correct number. All right, so we've got 237,000 accounts.
That's all accounts?
Yes, sir. We have 21,095 web-based accounts, and that's going up every month. So that's 9% of the total number of accounts. It costs us $1.06 to print and mail a bill. So we're saving, due to the web-based billing, $22,000 a month or $270,000 a year. And that's going up every month. So we're picking up about 5,000 a month. So we're trying our best to really publicize that because it's a really green answer to billing because
Sure.
It's kind of silly to send somebody a piece of paper and have them send it back to us. So we're really pushing that.
All right, so when you talk about silly, when I get a zero stormwater bill because I prepaid 2 quarters in advance, what's the theory behind sending out a zero bill and an envelope with it?
Well, that's pretty silly.
So this is my trick question for the year or the budget cycle. So we'll work to, and of course your answer could have been
into that one.
Your answer could have been, if I had signed up for budget billing or electronic, then this would have never happened in the first place.
Okay, I'm gonna change my answer. If you signed up for budget billing, that never would have happened.
But as a programmer, that might be something you adjust for those folks that like to receive a bill, and as people complain to me about, the $4.50 stormwater fee a quarter, go ahead and write an $18 check, and if you've got a credit balance or a zero bill, you don't send it out.
We're gonna call you tomorrow, Councilman, to sign you up.
All right, thank you. Stormwater delinquency accounts. Any problems there?
You know what? We haven't really had a lot of problems with people not paying their stormwater bill.
No court cases and lawsuits?
Well, we've had someone file an issue with the state comptroller, and that's currently being, I guess, processed. But Metro Legal clearly has established with me, that we have the authority to do it. So
right.
I think it's going to be a procedural thing that we demonstrate again that is valid.
Okay. And final question, we go in the summer watering season, so no changes in our adjustments that we give for the sprinkler account and that type of thing?
Yeah, that's Metro code.
Yes, sir. That is by code.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Davis, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Scott, for being here. Appreciate all you guys. I was actually doing a project with John today and like to compliment him for all the great work he does and is a great liaison to us.
Thank you.
Quickly, you mentioned I think it's $1.5 billion combined sewer project. I was under the impression, I guess just from some articles that had happened, that we were going to have to do that. Is it a definite then, or you were saying it's not a good idea and maybe we shouldn't do that? But
there's two questions to that. We're doing what's called the overflow abatement program, which is the entire sewer system. Councilman Hunt talked about the combined system by itself and how does it function. Okay. And I was talking exclusively of the combined sewer system itself. The overflow abatement program is a continuation of a program we've been doing since 1989, which is going to be about $1 billion to $1.5 billion over 11 years. It's going to be a lot of extensive replacement and rehabilitation and construction of additional wastewater infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So they have some commonalities, but it's two separate topics.
So have we already started that, or when will we start, and are we going to raise fees to sort of pay for this thing over the long haul?
It hasn't officially started yet because we're waiting for the EPA to respond to our submission of our capital action plan engineering report. Mm-hmm. So we don't have official requirement, like the clock isn't ticking, I guess is the summary. Mm-hmm. But we are doing projects associated with it because we're trying to be responsible stewards of the environment and do projects that we had planned on doing anyway. Mm-hmm. As far as the rates go, that's a year-to-year thing, and believe me, we're in really close contact with Mr. Riebling, and at this point, we're in good shape. Now, is that going to hold for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? I don't know. We're going to annually review it, and then at the point where it's appropriate to begin that discussion, we'll bring it to the council.
So yeah, as you start to sort of divide that over the years that you have to do it, you obviously have to reassess at that point.
Yes, sir.
We'll probably have an eye on the labor pool here from the council. I mean, that's a really big city project, and so we'll be looking to see where that labor pool is coming from and that sort of thing. You may have known I was going to ask you this. The only other thing I had was just something that's been going on in my district, but the community gardens and the floodplain thing that's going on. Right now, there's a distinction among zoning categories for that. Is there, any way we can just allow community gardens in every zoning district in the floodplain? And your thoughts on that, and maybe we could work with the mayor's office and kind of come up with something. Well,
I mean, the simple answer to that is zoning is y'all's call. You can dictate that. Personally, I think it's a great idea. It's a great use of floodplain. So I think it's a wonderful idea. I guess I was under the impression that we needed to go through, you guys, but we could just do. You're thinking an ordinance or something like that would be the appropriate. I don't think it's our call. From the Water Services perspective, floodplain and floodway land use, I don't think is anybody's call except for maybe planning department and the council. I mean.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get that drafted up and get back to you guys. Thanks.
All right.
Councilman Bednay, you're recognized.
Thank you. I have to say, we hear a lot about private and public and, who does a better job. And I can say, at least in my district, the city came forward and solved many problems that the private sector left unfinished. So I appreciate the work you guys do. I have a question about turning off the water of residents in Davidson County. Apparently, being told by somebody in my constituency that many times they disconnect the wrong water service, and apparently this is done by a company out of the city. I wonder if, how can we prevent that from happening in the future? And I don't know how often it happens. I think there's a question somewhere in there.
Well, we do have a contractor that does our cutoffs for us, and I'd be pretty surprised if they're cutting off the wrong one, because we have a really good computer-based system that communicates laptop to laptop about which one to turn off. Mm-hmm. If you can provide me some specifics, we'll investigate what happened, but we're pretty careful not to cut off the wrong people, because that makes them really, really mad. And but I'd like some specifics if you could provide them. I'll call you tomorrow, and maybe we can get that.
That works. And besides that, just wanted to say again, thank you very much for the work you guys do.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Claiborne, you're recognized.
Thank you. I got one of those mistaken cutoffs that I was planning to call Mr. Kennedy about tomorrow.
Your own personal service? We cut off your home?
No.
Oh.
One of my neighbors.
Okay.
So anyway, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
I have just one question. On in the budget book on J20, under the operating reserve fund, there's an addition of $344,800 for travel, tuition, and dues. What is that?
Okay. We're not increasing our travel budget. We may have.
There was nothing in there in 2011, nothing in there in 2012. 2013, it's $344,800.
Okay. Well, what happened is a budgeted line item got moved from one to the other. I'm telling you right now that we're not increasing our travel budget, so it's flat. So I'll get you exactly how that number went from 0 to 344. But what I can tell you is it's a line item amount shift. It doesn't reflect what actually is happening.
Okay, that's, when I look at the other departments and see that they're either cutting or eliminating their travel budget, it's hard for me to accept the fact that you're adding $250,000 in.
We're not doing that.
Okay.
We're not doing that.
Thought we'd found some money.
Council Lady Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman McGuire and Director Potter, and I also want to give kudos to Mr. Kennedy as well. I've been working with him extensively, as I have a great number of stormwater issues in my district, and you have been very, very responsive. And the question I'm asking is, and I don't know if this falls under your department per se, but the curbside storm drains, is that something that you all handle, or is that under Public Works?
We handle the drains.
Okay, the question is, what will it take to replace these curbside storm drains in older neighborhoods where they have rusted and have become a hazard to children playing in the streets? Are there newer type storm drains being installed and put in place for replacements? Do you have a system to replace aged ones? Is there some type of timeline? Do you all know where all of them are throughout the city? And how long do they last?
As part of our permit, we're required to have a GIS system that indicates the location of every single one of our storm drains, so we do know where they are. There's also 27,000 of them, so we have to be very cautious about a wholesale replacement plan. What we do is, if we come upon a drain that requires maintenance, we send out an expert to take a look and see what we can do to make it whole. So what I'll do is I'll have John call you tomorrow and get the locations of the ones you're concerned about, and we'll go out there and take a look at them. If they're a hazard to children, we'll replace them.
So it's not something that is triggered based on the age of them in a system. It's triggered by if there's observation and those that are reported by, people within the community.
Well, they're made out of cast iron, so they've got a pretty healthy lifespan. So we don't really expect them to rust quickly or to be damaged. And so it is a replacement required kind of thing. It's not something that you have a scheduled replacement plan for.
Are there monies allocated within this budget? I didn't see it for replacement of those type things.
It's in the stormwater O&M budget. That's a maintenance item. So that's part of what they do from the County Hospital Road location.
Okay, and also, can I get a report on the creeks similar to like the Owendale Creek that we've been working on, Mr. Kennedy? Can you give me a report of creeks that you've cleaned out specifically with large equipment?
Sure, we'll provide that to you.
Thank you.
Council Lady Allen, you're recognized.
Two questions. First, I'm guessing that it's in the city's interest for us to, as a city, become better about conserving water. And right now, if I'm remembering correctly, our sprinkler fee is set up so that you, in essence, get sort of a deduct on your sewer fee if your water consumption goes up in the summer because you're assuming that you're sprinkling. Is that correct?
The way it works is we take a snapshot of your water use from January, February, and March, and then from April to November, we take 130% of your January, February, and March use. Anything beyond, excuse me, anything beyond that, we assume that it didn't go to the sewer, so we don't charge you a sewer fee for that.
I've always appreciated that, but now I'm looking at if we want to encourage people to be smart and plant things that don't require landscaping, would it be a consideration to move toward a fee structure that does not encourage that? And is that a council function, or do y'all make that decision?
Oh, no, the council sets the rates.
Okay.
That question is extraordinarily complicated.
Okay, we can talk about it.
It's going to require a lot of discussion.
Okay.
I really don't think we have the time to do it here.
Okay, I'll move on then. Second question, in terms of long-term planning, Nashville is moving towards increasing density, particularly in certain corridors, and I would just be interested to know in terms of budgeting for the future. This may be a capital improvements budget question rather than an actual operating budget question. Is there money to enlarge the water and sewer lines for corridors that we know we're going to be increasing capacity or need increased capacity?
We have a water and sewer master plan that we maintain, that we work very closely with the planning department on to react to their forecasts. It's been very successful, and the good news, excuse me, the good news is that we've got a very robust system in the, quote, old city, both water and wastewater. So on redevelopment, it makes a lot of sense from an infrastructure perspective, from our perspective, to use that land because we've got the infrastructure in place. It's a lot more expensive to get a drop of water from Alejandro to a far reach of the city than it is nearby. So all of that does make sense, but the summary is we work really closely with planning to anticipate growth, and I think the perfect example of that is the Nolensville Road corridor. We were ahead of that problem, and in some ways we kind of we were ahead of it from a sewer perspective, but we're also recovering from it because our major project in the overflow abatement program is going to be a Mill Creek sewer project. That's going to be really expensive. That's a direct result of the additional growth in that corridor.
Gotcha. And are there documents that sort of summarize that would be available to interested council people?
I can send you a copy of our master plans.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Director Potter, I don't have any other members in my queue, so we sure appreciate you being here, and thanks for hanging in there with us.
Thank you.